Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about the 3 reasons why the Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's latest film, shows us why Hollywood is in a crisis. I'm going to give you my professional perspective. Remember, my goal is always educational, so you can learn about the art of filmmaking to help us become better artists. Let's go with the reason number 1. Inflation is destroying Hollywood. I don't like talking about politics or economics, but sometimes it's inevitable. The reality is that movies are made with money, and Hollywood is definitely being affected by this. But the most incredible part is that they are the creators of their own problem. I'm gonna quickly explain how inflation has hit Hollywood, so we can understand how this is reflected on the screen in the Odyssey. Let's suppose that I sell shoes, and it cost me $2 to produce a pair of shoes, and the selling price is $4. If I sell 3 pairs of shoes, I make a $6 profit, $2 for each pair. But a company must always grow. If it isn't growing, it's in deficit. So the following year, to make more money, the company has 2 options. Either I produce more shoes or I raise the price of the shoes. This happens everywhere. When companies are going through a less favorable period, they raise products prices to cover that expected growth, even if they aren't actually expanding. What has happened to Hollywood? To keep existing, the industry has reached a crossroad where it has had to constantly inflate prices. It has inflated them to a point that has severely damaged quality. For example, you can even see this on streaming platforms. How it's harder to share accounts now. Subscriptions are more expensive, and there are advertisements before and right in the middle of the movies. Why? Because subscriber growth is no longer what it used to be. And how can we see this in the Odyssey? Well, the movie cost $250 million, and what you actually see on the screen is a far cry from what could be done with $250 million 20 or 25 years ago. We see cheap sets, a custom design that leaves a lot to be desired. It's pretty poor in my opinion, with very ugly rubber armor, especially for the Trojans. The sets and the city of Troy are aesthetically very weak. And why does this happen? Because the materials used to build sets and make customs are also more expensive. Everything is more expensive. I know some younger people might think I'm crazy or wrong, but your only point of reference is the last 10 or 15 years. When you look at the production from the 90s, the last century, the average level of detail and art direction in period pieces was tremendous. Just look at this: Gladiator, for example, Troy, Braveheart, The History of Joan of Arc, The Last Samurai, and so on. The standard was much higher. So you might ask, where did those $250 million go? It went into that inflationary spiral. Not to mention the massive professional fees for actors, directors, and department heads. It also went into equipment rentals, contracts with IMAX, for example, things like that. When a top-tier production company approves a movie budget, all those contracts are already locked into those rental rates, and a huge amount of money goes right there. In other words, Hollywood has driven prices so high that doing even the basics to get a movie made has become a massive challenge. Try to compare it to yourself. I know that this movie has nothing to do with the actual story of Troy, which is actually the Iliad, but let's just compare the production level of the movie, the costumes, the sets, the scenery, the atmosphere of that film. It's all beautiful. The walls of Troy actually look impenetrable. This is an endless amount of detail that truly captures the grandeur of the story. Actually, even in Gladiator, the art direction is extraordinary. But now let's move on to the second reason. The era of marketing is hurting cinema. You might wonder, how can these people release a movie with such obvious flaws and just not care? Because to some extent, it doesn't matter anymore. To be profitable, a movie no longer needs to stay in theaters for weeks, like it did back in the 90s. As long as enough people go to the theaters during the opening weekend, that is more than enough. That initial rush happens faster than the time it takes for the word-of-mouth reviews to spread. Back in the 90s, in the early 2000s, A film had to stay in theaters for many weeks to turn a profit. So what happened? Word of mouth was incredibly important. People would leave the theater and go back to see it a second time if the film was good. And this created a massive wave. As the weeks passed, the studio would hit its financial targets. Today it works differently. The studio doesn't need weeks. They aim to deliver a massive initial strike through an intense marketing campaign, so people go see the movie just once during the opening week. So whether the movie is actually good or not doesn't matter anymore. What matters is convincing you that it's good enough for you to go see it just once at the first week. And how do they convince you? This brings us to the third reason. Specialized critics are part of the movie's marketing. This is one of the problems that fake news has brought to the industry. In fact, a very interesting phenomenon happens. A movie can be bad, but if the so-called specialized critics label it a masterpiece, there will always be a group of people who repeat that it's a masterpiece just to avoid contradicting the experts. Sometimes I ask myself, what is the point of doing that? What is the goal of deceiving people? Why poorly educate people visually? If the ultimate goal is simply to make money, aren't there easier ways to make money? Why make things so complicated with this? In conclusion, Christopher Nolan is still a great director. The Odyssey proves that when a director is truly talented, their perspective and visual language can always bring something valuable to the table. Even though generally speaking the film has many deficiencies, from my point of view, Christopher Nolan still manages to captivate us at times with great scenes. One of them is the representation of the underworld. Out of all the scenes, this is one of my favorites. It's profound, and within the context of the journey is a captivating moment that shows the power of the cinematic language. What I mean is that there are movies that are overall good, but fail to have single moments as powerful as that one. Another valuable sequence is the depiction of the polymenus in the cave. It's a very interesting moment that reminded me of the monster from Pan's Labyrinth. The sequence with Circe is also quite fascinating. These are stand-out moments that I would rescue from the film, and the way Nolan brought them to life is quite good. So to conclude, I would say that it's important for you to watch the film and draw your own conclusions. Building your own critical mindset is the most important thing when it comes to growing as a filmmaker. So if you liked this video, please give me a like, subscribe to the channel and share it. I see you the next time.